My name is Galit Frydman, and we completed the Deshpande program back in 2016-17. Also alumni from the VMS group at MIT, as well as the Translational Fellow program. As I mentioned, this technology was developed as part of my PhD and postdoc while here at MIT and MGH. And we essentially went through all of the different offerings here at MIT, which were wonderful, and you guys have all heard about it, and you're hearing about all the new projects now. And that led us to spin out Coagulo Medical Technologies in 2018. So what is the problem we're solving and the current competition? So current coagulation testing has been around for about the last 50 to 70 years. There really haven't been any new advances in the actual chemical assays and the biological testing we're doing. There's a lot of new development in the mechanical or electrical way that clots are being tested, but not in actually probing the chemical composition of the coagulation pathway. The current major players in this area include as an example, the Haemonetics TEG Success, or the Hemosonics machine from Chicago. These are quote-unquote point-of-care machines, so you're looking at giant printer size machines. They require an entire tube of blood. They can only perform 4 tests simultaneously, and again, they're performing tests from back in the 50s and 70s. And one of the issues with that approach to testing also is it will tell you that you have a problem with the coagulation pathway, but it won't tell you what the exact coagulation factor abnormality is and how to address that, right? So you can go to the emergency room or the OR and do a test, and they'll say, okay, you have a prolonged PT, PTT, an abnormality in your viscoelastic testing. There's a problem, but it doesn't tell you exactly what coagulation factor is being affected and whether it's an inhibition or a deficiency. So that's where we come in with our new chemical tests. And we've essentially spent the last 6 years being able to transfer that testing system from a benchtop classic glass PDMS microfluidic device into something that's actually scalable, commercializable. We have an automated point-of-care reader. It's handheld with a single-use disposable cartridge. As I mentioned, some of the new coagulation testing companies that are coming out, again, no new tests. They're using the same reagents, your PT, PTT, ACT, but they're not actually answering the questions that the clinicians have. So the new assays that we developed are able to probe through the entire coagulation cascade and say if you have a deficiency or an inhibition in a coagulation factor and quantify that effect on endpoint in the coagulation. So as an example, the original study that the Deshpande Center helped fund, which was the basis for our spin out, was a study that we did in the ER where we took blood samples and completely blinded to medical history or medical record. We're able to identify when a patient was on a blood thinner or anticoagulant, what kind of anticoagulant it was, and how much it was affecting that patient. And since then, we've done studies to also demonstrate that we can monitor things like the reversal of those anticoagulation reagents as well in emergency and surgical settings. We provide an essential value across all the different scopes of healthcare. And we've been partnering with different pharmaceutical companies over the last 4 years and different clinical partners to demonstrate that we can go all the way from helping preclinical in terms of asset development, so looking for on and off target effects on your coagulation drugs or on your drugs, going into bespoke testing development for clinical trial assets, and going into post in terms of when you're already commercial and administering and monitoring for the patient. I already went through these. In terms of coagulation, just broadly, I know a lot of people here have gone through things like atrial fibrillation, cardiac surgery. There's very obvious areas. But coagulation abnormalities actually touch upon every major disease segment. So anything that causes any kind of trauma in the tissue or inflammation, such as cancer, infection, autoimmune disease, all of those are going to potentially cause an abnormality in your coagulation pathway. And a very large amount of morbidity and mortality for all of those diseases across all those spectrum are actually a result of abnormal clotting or thrombotic events or abnormal bleeding. So this touches many patients in many areas, and there's a lot of room for improvement. Coag testing in general is a giant market. So broadly speaking, all coag testing, you're looking at over a $6 billion market at this point in time. Our current clinical studies are mostly focused in an area where there is very limited coagulation testing, and a lot of that is blood volume dependent. So we have a number of clinical studies that have been published specifically in the SICU, NICU, and PICU looking at anticoagulation resistance detection. So helping prevent clotting or thrombotic events in critical care pediatric patients. Many publications and abstracts. And we've also received a number of grants and awards since graduating from the Deshpande Center, which includes, we won the Alexandria Launch Labs Prize, we've gotten SBIR grants, and we have a multi-million-dollar DoD contract as well. That study is specifically looking at hemorrhage management and blood product administration. In terms of our milestones and where we are now, so since spinning out in 2018, we've since completed our product development, and we're finishing our verification validation studies, and we're now going into getting ready for our pivotal FDA studies and raising our Series B for that. So a brief breakdown, I'm happy to speak to people at the end of this if they have interest, but we're looking at about $5 million to reach the completion of our pivotal trial and add-on studies, and then another about 15 to do transfer to manufacturing, getting ready to launch. Since graduating from Deshpande, we have raised over $12 million in dilutive funding in a Series and a seed, as well as over $4 million in non-dilutive funding. You'll see going through our management and our support team, many of these are actually individuals that we met through the VMS program or through the Deshpande program. So with that, I'll take any questions at the end of this if anyone wants to speak. And hopefully I represented the Deshpande Center well.